Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST. Every day of the week, we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and the ETH ETF market, as well as anything else online where we think you may be able to make some or a lot of money. I'm your host, Bchek. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Bread. And today we're very delighted to have a special guest with us. We have bonafidehan, founder of Deca and Shape, a new L2 for creators, and also one part of 6529 Capital. Han, welcome to the stage with us today. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you for having me. Pretty excited to be on the stage. Good.
Looking forward to get into all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about Shape, which is really trying to do something different from the L2 perspective, and also just get your insights. You've been part of 6529 Capital for a while. Big NFT maxi. We had a great conversation about NFTs when you were down in London. So looking forward to hear your insights on that too. As usual, we're going to get into all of the market stuff in just a little bit, but just a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is exceptionally risky. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Wednesday. It is the 24th of July. It is T minus 24 hours before your trip to the States. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing pretty well. Yeah. What an exciting Wednesday. We have the first day live of the ETH ETFs. I have one day before I'm going to, for the first time, take off time from the modern market. But also a bit of disappointment. Brad and I, who've been having great chats over the last couple of weeks, discovered a lot of similarities, but apparently there's a big difference.
This is your first falling out.
Yeah, it's a big falling out. I'm a big aviation geek, and he's making fun of that passion of mine.
And how does that make you feel, Legendary?
Hurt, misunderstood,
deserve people. That's weird. It's weird.
Explain your position, Brad. What is your criticism of people who know about planes?
Honestly, I think it's just like a reflection of how my brain works. For some reason, there's like certain sectors of the world that I just totally offload things. Like I don't think about dates. I'm horrible with holidays and shit. So I need, and like planes is something else. I've been on a lot of planes in my life. It's just like a black box that I've drawn. For whatever reason, my brain just never retained any information. There's no care. So it was always so strange to have spent so much time on planes. Like I said, I'd be speaking consultant over 200 flights, and I just never ingested any of that information. I couldn't tell you anything. But then there was people like Legendary that would be with me as consultants, and they could rattle off everything. He can tell you where the best seat in any plane is. Rattle off some numbers. You could probably find a approximate plane that it correlates to, and then the seat that's good inside of that. It's weird.
Do you know what part of my flying?
Go on.
Do you know what part of my flying routine is, Brad? What I do is I have one of my favorite YouTubers is Mentor Pilot. He is a pilot who does excellent incident videos, like 1 hour long analysis of what went wrong with the plane, why did it crash, what happened, explains every single detail. Like sometimes takes 15 minutes to explain events that unfolded within like 15 or 20 seconds. I download that. I have that on my phone, on my iPad, and I enjoy watching that mid-flight. And I always watch, if I can, find a video that's exactly on the plane type that I'm flying.
Okay, so this is the differentiator here. My superpower in this world, everyone has a couple of superpowers. My one is that once I'm inside of something moving, I'm out. I'm sleeping. I'm not conscious by the time we're off the ground for planes. So I don't need to fill that with anything.
That's pretty good. Legendary, it sounds pretty deranged, frankly, that you want to learn about the crashing plane that you're literally on. That's pretty hilarious. Han, weigh in here. Which side are you on? Fortunately, you'll know that whatever side that you're on, you have some support. But
he's gonna do that the entire show. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna step in. Han Solo.
Yeah, like Han Solo. But yeah, totally fine. I am part of Team Legendary. I'm really into planes. They are modern marvels. But then, Brett, I'm also on your team because, I mean, you've perfected a form of teleportation because like you just go
It's
to
amazing.
sleep and you end up in a different location.
It's only bad when you're driving, which may or may not have happened in my world.
Bullish teleportation, to be honest. Definitely a fan of that. Look, guys, we are going to get into all of the market straight away now. Let's get into it. As always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, let's start with some price action. Actually, I'm going to share the screen. Remember, we're live on X. We're live on YouTube as well. Let's get into the price action. So we've got Bitcoin, which is fairly flat, 66.5K. We've got ETH down 1% at 3.470. Solana still outperforming the rest, just up 1% at $177. Getting into the headlines themselves, number one, ETH ETFs do $1 billion in total volume, 23% roughly of the Bitcoin ETF first day volume. We had some further analysis from Eric Balkunas, day one in the books for ETH ETFs, who did 1 billion in total volume, which is 23% of what the spot Bitcoin ETH ETFs on their first day did. The gap between ETH and the newborn 8 is healthy, plus 625 million. So that's a sizable chunk of which should convert to inflow. A separate point may be made by Kruger Macros, Alex Kruger, prominent kind of crypto poster, said first Ethereum ETF day is in. ETH up 1%, BTC down a couple of percent. ETH BTC is up, alts were down. Kind of taking it in the more political direction, saying no sell the news this time. Kamala coming in hot in the polls is not good for prices overall. Obviously, this is all happening against this quite significant swings in the political arena, where pretty significant events seem to be happening quite routinely. And so the market is obviously pricing those things in a quite live way. Next, Hamilton Lane, $900 billion asset manager, launches a private credit fund on Solana. Fortune provided some additional information there, said over $920 billion in assets under management and supervision. Hamilton Lane is one of the world's largest firms investing in alternative assets. It launched a private credit fund on the Solana blockchain. They partnered with a Web3 protocol to do that. Next, BlackRock's Biddle liquidity fund applies to Ethena for reserve funds to invest in its treasury-backed product as a low-risk diversification play. We've seen this a few times now from some very significant some very significant Web3 protocols receiving interest from BlackRock's fund to try to attract that capital, and they've been putting off these applications. So that is very interesting to note. We're going to touch on all of that in a bit more when we get to the headlines discussion a little bit later. Some notable sales from around the space today. Tyler Hobbs Fidenza selling for 31 ETH. Definitely want to throw to Han in a second to speak about Fidenzas because he's got some interesting stories there. CryptoPunk Wild White here selling for 38 ETH and a CryptoPunk Pipe selling for 27.5. Legendary. That is the price action. Those are the headlines. Before we get into a bigger discussion today on some of those topics, is there anything catching your attention in the market?
Yeah, let's take a look at Mintify, our NFT trading and marketplace partner. I think generally speaking, market looks a bit red today. Pudgies are sitting at a 10.7 for ETH floor, reporting being down a bit more than 2%. That's actually only the case because they had a nice pump yesterday, had crossed 11 ETH initially. I think a lot of that was also in conjunction with VanEck releasing their video for the ETH ETF, which was basically exclusively featuring Pudgies and was quite a significant actually sign for me to see a TradFi company like VanEck not only leaning into using a Pudgy as their PFP, but also using it as using that IP for a quite significant product launch for them as well. Mm-hmm. Other than the Pudgies, the rest of the market is moving down a bit or pretty flat, with Apes at 2.4 ETH, with Azukis being down 3% to 3.9 ETH. Yesterday, when we reported on them, they had crossed 4 ETH, but weren't able to hold that. Miladys and Redacted, Remilios both gave back a bit of the respective pumps that they had yesterday, and are now at a
Miladys at 5.6 though.
Yeah, 5.6 ETH floor, and Remilios at 1.7. One other collection that I wanted to point out is actually Pirate Nation. We talked on Pirate Nation a couple of times, but the thing that I found interesting is that when we reported on Pirate Nation hitting the all-time high at 1.6-ish ETH, And again, like they moved up from 1 ETH after the TGE had established a new all-time high. They haven't been giving back that pump to the market and is still sitting at the 1.53 ETH floor. So defending basically the region close to the new all-time high very, very strongly.
Very, very impressive. Legendary, are we, is anyone on our team an ambassador for Pirate Nation? Because we keep throwing them so many flowers. They're doing an amazing job. Are we ambassadors?
No, I told you my story with Pirate Nation. I was holding a ton of pirates, but it's the only wallet that ever got hacked in 7 years was holding my pirates. And I was so frustrated because of that hack that I never bought them back because I didn't want to be reminded of my shame, of my loss. So I'm always FOMOing when I report on Pirate Nations, and I don't have any affiliation with them.
Interesting. That is a real shame. I understand that pain. Han,
happened with the Forgotten Runes.
Oh,
I had a shit ton of wizards. I was lazy and stupid, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and the process of buying them back was just not awesome. So I lost a sizable portion of my collection, but I do have some that I'm still holding on to. Yeah,
painful to go back into a collection that you lose stuff, I think. Han, wanted to throw to you here, like as part of the 6529 fund, one of your big bets is on NFTs, and we saw a Fidenza sale just happening here. You've got quite an interesting history with the Fidenza collection. Definitely wanted to give you a chance to share that and just kind of your thesis on NFTs and maybe where you see the NFT market as things stand.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, NFTs. I consider myself to be an NFT maxi. So I have a pretty sizable collection. I run an NFT startup called Deca. We are creating a chain that's really dedicated to creativity, and a big portion of that will be NFTs. And then part of 652 Capital, which is the biggest NFT fund. So definitely an NFT maxi. My thesis around NFTs still holds. So if I think about NFTs as essentially these programmatic digital objects that have this property called object permanence, and I'll describe that a little bit more, but that thesis has not changed at all. So object permanence is this property of objects where, take a real world physical object, like a fork. Put the fork down on the table, and let's say you leave it on the table for 100 years, and you come back. It's still there. And so this object permanence property is part of the natural world, and we take it for granted. That's never been the case with digital objects before NFTs. So the object permanence part is really remarkable if you really think about it for digital objects. And then it's programmatic, which means you can do anything, and the field is open for what NFTs can be. So I'm an NFT maxi as strong as they can be. I haven't really paid attention that much to like the most recent NFT market activity, but certainly it seems like signs of life are emerging from the long winter that we've been in. And
so what got you into it in the first place? And I know that you had a particular affiliation, a particular affinity for the Tyler Hobbs Fidenza collection. I think you've got to share that particular story. And then also maybe why did you, once you kind of went in so hard in 2021, why have you kind of, I guess, just taken stock a little bit and maybe let the market do its thing whilst you kind of hold on to this core thesis with some of those core NFTs? If you could speak to that kind of initial collection that you built up.
Yeah, so I got into NFTs around 2020 and 2021. And a friend told me, hey, go look at NFTs. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll take a look. And I was like, okay, what do NFTs do? What should I do with them? Somebody told me, hey, well, you can buy them. So I was like, okay, I'll buy 2 punks, I'll buy 3 apes. And at the point,
so you went in big. You decided if you're going to buy them, you're going to buy the best.
Yeah, I was like, well, yeah, I was going to buy the best. And but I did buy floor punks, so I only have floor punks. And And at that point, I was like, okay, kind of cool, I guess. It didn't resonate as much. But then I saw at the time a DC investor had tweeted about this collection called Fidenza. And that was about 3 days after mint. So it was like everything had been minted, everything was on secondary market. I looked at it. I was like, wait, these are amazing. I love these. These are beautiful. And I really began to understand like what was being created here. Art blocks really had tried to create these like eternal objects. Like if you look at the history of art, like every single piece of art usually has archival methods associated with physical objects. Like how do you preserve this painting? How do you preserve this sculpture? And what I had realized with these eternal art objects that are being created is that they can exist forever because the art is inscribed on the chain and you can reproduce it. Of course, assuming you have a JavaScript stack that can replicate it. But that was the thing that really got me into it. And I ended up buying a Fidenza. Then I bought another one and another one. I kept buying. It became a complete obsession. And I ended up with, at the time, 56 Fidenzas. And I was like collecting sets of them, piecing them together. And that led to my love of NFTs. And I've never stopped loving NFTs since.
What price? So you mentioned you noticed the Fidenza collection early. Like what kind of time span? Did you buy all 56 in 1 week at an early price? What was the lowest entry and how long did it take you to the price where you were still collecting?
Yeah, so when I started, the first Fidenza that I bought was, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was like, it was 0.15 ETH when I started.
Bargain.
But the obsession continued, and near the end, the last one that I bought, so like near the end, I think there was just very expensive car prices. And even then, I was still popping them because I was so obsessed with the collection.
Them Veblen goods, man. Price goes up, you want them more.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. And then you actually became known for a little while as like a Fidenza broker, right? You were the person to go to broker any particular Fidenza deals.
Yeah, that was an interesting phase of my life. I did not think that I would become a broker of anything. And then it turned out, okay, so I loved the collection, the community, the artist. And so a lot of people began to approach me to ask for advice on, should I buy this thing? Should I sell this thing? And then organically it turned into, hey, I know this guy who's trying to, so somebody would be like,
surely your
hey,
answer to that question was just like buy. I mean, your buying activity was just buy, right?
Yeah, I tried to provide like very neutral advice on, should you buy at this price for this particular palette, combination of properties, and so it automatically turned into, I want to buy. It turns out, hey, I know this guy who's selling, and then I would help them get to a price that they both agreed on, and yeah, I turned into, for about like a 2 to 3 month time span, the guy that you would go to for Fidenza advice and buying and selling. And then it went to the point where I met everyone in the space that I work with today. For example, 6529, met him through that process. I helped him buy the Tulip, met Cosimo Medici. He wanted to buy a Fidenza. And so I met all of these like NFT figures through this process, and it's like pretty amazing.
That's an amazing story. Definitely wanted to give you a chance to share that. That's pretty crazy. And like, I think really encapsulates a certain moment in NFT history, like early stages. But I want to kind of shift the conversation to, look, you established this love or obsession with NFTs themselves. This idea of digital permanence to an object seemed to be very important. And then that obviously led you to found Deca, which was this platform where you can display these objects in a more beautiful way than what was previously, just go to OpenSea and share your collection in that way. So I want to give you a chance to speak to Deca but then also maybe connect to Shape, which is now where you're taking Deca and trying to help creators with this new L2?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Deca is interesting. I had a bunch of NFTs and I didn't have a great place to share them. So initially I had a website. So I created a website. That was my personal website of the collection. And I arranged the NFTs in different rows and had labels associated with the names. And what I realized as the first user of Deca was that I needed a product that could very easily create galleries and ways to display NFTs and then eventually ways to discover them. And so that's how I got into Deca. And that Deca today has turned into a great place for discovering NFTs, especially art. And one of the really interesting things that we've done is we created artist pages where every single page for an artist has all the art that the artist has published across chains, across platforms, and they're all buyable on a single page. So a lot of artists actually use it as their portfolio page. But yeah, that whole story from buying NFTs as the original Fidenza whale and then ending up building Deca, it just turned into like a very natural, and of course, in between being a broker, it just was a very natural, organic way that my life all became about NFTs.
That's pretty awesome. And one thing I've really noted about Deca is how much support it has from the creators themselves. That was like what the really, really big thing I noted. And then what I've also noted is now that you've announced Shape, which is this L2 for creators, how a lot of the creators have kind of come out in support of this. There's a really important point that I think needs to be made about how L2s function and how Shape kind of is differentiating itself in order that it be more helpful to creators. But I want to give you a chance to kind of explain that and why you thought that this step was necessary for Deca and the team to kind of create this L2 and in order to be more helpful to creators.
Yeah, totally. So as part of Deca, as we were building Deca throughout the years, we obviously interacted a lot with artists. We got to know artists deeply, what they wanted, what was important to them. Um, and throughout a lot of the conversations and through the scaling of Ethereum, so obviously for Ethereum, the way that we are scaling the system is not a monolithic chain. It is it's like modular chains that are built on top of the security of Ethereum, and these modular chains are called L2s, where Ethereum is an L1. And so throughout the whole growth of L2s, we were chatting with lots of artists, and the theme that we noticed during all these chats is that a lot of artists felt like there was no home for them in L2s. They thought of ETH L1 as currently their home, but as many of the Ethereum kind of bulls know, eventually ETH L1 gas, based on ETH price and demand for the block space on ETH L1, will eventually crowd out things that we can do as creators on ETH L1. And so that was the theme that we realized, that they felt that there was no home for them in the L2 landscape. And so that's where we decided, okay, this is interesting. There is a home for culture on L2s that we can help create. And as part of that, we thought that one of the most important things there was to recreate the dynamics of ETH L1. Why did culture take place on ETH L1? Because we think that ETH L1 is almost like a good that is shared by the entire community, and it's built in ways that we all benefit.
And do you think that the current design of L2s is not distributing the benefit to the kind of community and its creators enough?
Yeah, certainly. I think the beautiful thing about ETH L2s is that every one of the L2s can make their own choices of which trade-offs they choose. So there's certain variables, and you can choose, hey, I'm going to select this thing and that thing, and it becomes a little combination. And so the choice of combinations that we've chosen is that, so there are these nodes on Optimism that are called sequencers. So they are the workhorses uh, for Optimism L2s. And then there's a fee associated with these sequencers. And this fee is the thing that is that's the driving factor for when you have demand for the block space. That's the price. Well, it's a little bit more complex than that.
Sure.
But what we have decided is we are going to create an L2 where almost all of it is going to, all the sequencer fees are just given back to the community in special ways. And I can tell you more about that.
Interesting. And I think that's probably the big differentiator between your design. As you said, you can kind of choose your design incentives versus the other L2s, and everyone can kind of decide their own. And that's what stood out to me, which is you're trying to make sure more of that is going back to the creators, which I think is really important to understand. So for the people who are listening in thinking, oh, it's getting a little bit technical, I think, with the proliferation of L2s all over the place and its increased usage, like understanding some of these dynamics is probably going to be super helpful to you as you proceed in the exploration on the various chains. We've just got a few more minutes left on this section, and I know Brad's got another question for you. Then we're going to get into the headlines as usual. But you just mentioned you wanted to expand on something there, Han. I want to give you a chance to do that.
Yeah, totally. So there's several. I'll say two things about Shape further. One is, in addition to gas back. But by the way, that's what we've called it, giving the gas sequencer fees back to the community. That's called gas back. But in addition to that, every chain is a society. It's a culture of people who have opted into a particular flavor and a particular culture that is on the chain. And so one of the other great points about Shape is that many of the great creators and artists in the space have opted into Shape, and so they plan to create really interesting projects on Shape, and that is a big determinant to what Shape will feel like, and
Sure.
what things will be created on it. And then the other thing about Gasback is it's a property that I can just describe and say, hey, you get all the sequencer fees back. But the interesting thing is the following. So sequencer fees it goes back when it goes back to the creator. So let's say I create a smart contract on Shape, and it generates a bunch of transactions. What you get back is 80% of the sequencer fees. Of the remaining 15% goes to the Optimism Collective to fund public goods. And then of the 5% goes to a big chunk of it goes to infrastructure, and then the tiny sliver goes back to the Shape Foundation. But what's interesting about that 80% is that it is the invisible hand. When I create something on chain, now I can get something back, and it becomes native. It's a form of native monetization. And it's so interesting because, as we all know, like, the invisible hand is a strong driving force. If you have a place where you create something, and if it becomes successful, you automatically get something back. That is a strong incentive, and I think it will be the thing that launches 1,000 ships in the future. Of course, in the beginning, until chains and crypto is broadly accepted by society, it is not going to be this ridiculous thing that makes you immediately rich as a creator. but it's one of those variables. It's one of those engines that once
Sure.
you put into place over the years, it will turn into a massive change for creators.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, as people say, like when you design the incentives a particular way, you can probably predict various outcomes. And if you design the incentives in a better way, I think people might be pleasantly surprised about what kind of things they'll receive back. Bread, as we're drawing to a close on this section, I know you had a question on this. Want to come to you before we get into the usual headlines discussion.
Yeah, and so that question was actually it's a little further away now. So I'll just keep something in context. We're talking about the L2. This is actually something that I'm surprised hasn't developed yet, and you guys are kind of in a unique position to do because you're NFT focused. So have you thought at all about creating a native way for people to turn or take their NFTs from the L1 to your particular L2, as opposed to, like, I know you can create things on the L2, but those are L2 native assets. You can't take them elsewhere. Like it's not as easily. So is that something you guys have thought about, creating a way for people to take their L1 NFTs to your particular L2?
Yeah, definitely. We so a form of bridging will be available over the coming years and months. So you'll be able to bridge your ETH L1 asset into NFT into Shape. And what's really interesting about it is the following. We believe, because we have all these amazing creators and artists that have opted into NFTs on Shape. And then once you bridge your NFT over into Shape, what I predict is going to happen is that there will be a web of NFTs that will programmatically interact with each other. And it will be this crazy thing that's happening, that will happen where, in the first cycle, when we thought of NFTs, they were largely inert objects. Like you kind of bought it and you held it. That's the object permanence part. We got that part right, and we did that in the first cycle. But what's going to get crazy in this cycle is that once you have a place where creators create a place that creators can call home, and all these NFTs are being created there, and they're programmatic, it's going to be a little bit. I mean, it's going to go insane. I think, like in a very cultural way. People are going to be creating NFTs that interact with each other. NFTs will come to life, and so that's what I'm really excited about. And yes, there will be some form of bridging, so that you can move your NFT into the web of NFTs that will exist on Shape.
I love it, man. Really, really interesting to hear your thoughts. Always the kind of deep philosophical aspect of this conversation is really powerful, I think. And yeah, really appreciate your thoughts on this stuff. You're going to stick around. We're going to move into the headlines as usual now. But you're going to stick around to kind of give us your insights on those too. Appreciate you for that part of this. Legendary, let's slide into the headlines then. We're going to get into the ETH ETF stuff. I'm going to throw it to you straight away to kind of set us up with what happened yesterday. We were celebrating ETF Day yesterday, and we want to know, should we still be celebrating or not?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely should be celebrating. Day one is in the books. We've seen a bit more than 20% in volume compared to the first day of the BTC ETFs, which means we've seen almost 1.1 billion US dollars in volume, ahead of the pack being Grayscale with 458 M's in volume, followed by BlackRock with 248. In terms of the price, once the ETF launched, I think it was the very same effect that we've seen play out with the BTC ETF as well, which was a dump from 3.5K approximately to 3.4K. Been able to recover part of that. I think the untold hero of the story is actually the part of the Grayscale outflows at negative 484 mil, which is almost like 5% of the entire trust. And if you think about that magnitude, I think it's positive because it's just moving fast. If it moves like that, we're going to get rid of the topic very, very quickly. And we just can go to like celebrating inflows on the one hand. And on the other hand, given that size of outflows, and obviously you still have the
the overall volume that happened on day one. But given that size of outflows, and given the fact that people were, ramping up because we've seen it with the BTC ETF to kind of sell the news, I think a lot of people were expecting a quick dump. I obviously made fun of that with, the downward looking chart and happy ETH ETF day on my timeline as well. But given those two factors, so that anticipation of selling the news, at least for the short term, and the massive outflows in the Grayscale trust, that price resilience, and we've only seen like that quick wick down to 3.4K and have been able to, recover a good chunk of that because we're back to 3.465. So basically almost 2/3 back up the way to 3.5K is to me a very impressive start and a very resilient start for the ETH ETF.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Pretty solid. I want to hear Brett's thoughts in just a second. Just wanted to share a bit more kind of zoomed out context on ETFs. Obviously, we're so zoomed in on crypto all the time. Whereas some of the Bloomberg boys, as Legendary referred to them yesterday, are more like ETF guys first instead of crypto guys first. And so they shared this context yesterday where they said how Eric was curious how the ETH ETFs would rank in day one volume versus all 600 or so new launches in the past 12 months, excluding the BTC ETFs. ETHA would be number one by a lot. FETH would be number two. ETHW would be 5. ETH would be 7th, and ETHV in 13th spot. And CETH, which was the lowest among the group, would still rank in the top 10% versus a normal new launch. So I think the point being emphasized there by the Bloomberg boys is that that it's incredibly unusual for things to do this well. I saw crypto Twitter's initial reaction on the timeline being like, this is rubbish. This isn't a lot. Like, this is no good at all. But like placing it in the broader context of what ETFs are kind of expected to do, I think is pretty helpful here. Brad, would love to come to you on this for your general reflections. And then Han, would love to know if you have anything further to add here.
Yeah, if you want my deep analytical thoughts, I look at this and I go, oh, look, the rest of the world is kind of waking up and having exposure to the things that we're already deeply in and I'm completely convicted on. So like I see it, like it's a nothing burger to me. I don't look at it and it doesn't change anything. It's just like, okay, cool. Like, welcome to the party. It's going to continue to go up, guys. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So, yeah.
And do you guys at the fund analyze this stuff in any particular way? I know you're more kind of your specific NFT fund, but how are you guys thinking about ETH and the ETH ETF?
Oh, we are perma ETH bulls in that land. Yeah, I mean, this is a repackaging of as Brad said, like assets that we are very familiar with into forms that are familiar with to the rest of the world, and we are wiring up TradFi with crypto. There could be nothing more bullish than that. So I'm really into this news.
Good stuff. I think, I mean, ultimately that's quite a simple way to frame it, right? But I think that is the thing, or the main concluding point. People are maybe overthinking this or over-analyzing sometimes. And it seems to be the case, like, look, guys, we're just packaging this up, ready for other people to buy the thing that we have already been buying and then bullish on. So that is good that they're going to be able to access it in a better way. Unless there's anything to add there, then Legendary, maybe we can just slide straight into the second headline, which was to do with Hamilton Lane becoming the first asset manager to launch a fund on the Solana blockchain. I'm going to share the screen at the same time as well. So this was pretty big amounts, to be honest. With over $920 billion in assets under management and supervision, Hamilton Lane is one of the world's largest firms investing in alternative assets. On Tuesday, it announced the launch of a private credit fund on the Solana blockchain. Investors can now access the firm's Senior Credit Opportunities Fund, or SCOPE, via the network. Tokenizing SCOPE offers the chance to deepen Hamilton Lane's distribution by accessing mass affluent crypto native traders, said one of the founders. Legendary, any reflections on this kind of this tokenization of certain baskets of assets in order to try to access crypto native capital?
Yeah, I think that's the right step forward to do it. But I also have been, as of recently, I mean, we've been talking about like RWAs for quite a time on the show, right? And I said it that ever since I've been in crypto since 2016, it's been like a recurring theme to talk about tokenizing all kinds of different things, but it never felt as sticky as it feels right now. And to me, proof to that is that actually people start to be afraid of that. So someone had a post this morning about the EU allegedly coming up with
Oh, I saw that.
then I think it was Den Help with a digital registry for all of your assets, which is old news because the EU explored that back in 2021 and did a feasibility study on that. And I think it's still being discussed. It was an initial question was asked in the parliament and people then looked into it. However, the criticism in the comments was like, this is the big plan of BlackRock, the deep state, BlackRock, all the common actors, always the same. The plan to tokenize everything, tokenize the entire world. And this is how they will ultimately take control of us because they will tokenize everything. So to me, basically, that this fear of everything being tokenized, the fear of RWAs, makes it into BlackRock deep state conspiracy theories, is actually validating that it's way stickier this time because people now some people start to feel afraid of it, if you know what I mean with that. Because otherwise we've been like, oh yeah, it's a cool trend, and then we stop talking about that. But now for the first time, it seems like some people are like, oh, everything's going to be tokenized. Should I be afraid of that? I am afraid of that for whatever reasons. And yeah, I think it's a very positive thing that, not that people are afraid, but that this tokenization of various things is becoming a stickier topic.
Okay.
Also expanding on like the NFT chat that we had before, right? We talked about NFT, just that final comment, as art, as PFP, as all different things. But like typically when we talk about like tokenizing watches, one kettle finance, whatever that is, you don't necessarily think about those assets as NFTs first once they're tokenized. But
Sure.
it's often the standard that you use for that.
So you're saying that now it's far closer and the stuff's actually happening, whereas before, so maybe the fear of it is a reflection of the fact it's actually happening rather
Exactly.
than before
Yeah.
you didn't even need to be afraid of something which wasn't actually coming
Because
to
you
fruition.
didn't take it seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Brad, any thoughts on this, kind of hurtling towards RWAs and kind of more and more funds coming on board?
I'm glad they're doing it, but to be honest, the fact that RWAs are the focus of the conversation still tells me that we're bored as F in this space. A lot of like the social, like there's nothing for us to do right now, and I'm waiting for that to change. And I think we're starting to see some more like actual applications spin up, like prediction markets and shit. But yeah, blockchains is the perfect solution for RWAs, and you could argue that like the best use case we have is stablecoins, which is a form of RWA, and we're going to continue to see it happen because it is a better technology for it. I'm excited to see it happen. It's interesting to see it happen on Solana too. Like now you're starting to see it like really step into like the big three is kind of what now is being framed as like everyone's mental model of who owns the space. So it's good. It's going to continue to happen. Again, I think we're all bored because we're talking about RWAs. We want something to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Interesting that you did note that this one was on Solana. And you mentioned just before you guys were perma giga ETH bulls. I can't remember the exact term, to infinity. What's your take on how this kind of stuff has started? Well, how Solana has started to explode a little bit more. Funds seem to be far more confident deploying on Solana as well. Do you guys have a view as to kind of Solana's development? Do you think it's all going to go? Do you still prefer ETH for any specific reason? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Solana as well. So the big three for sure. Solana is interesting. It is, if you had to pick one representative of monolithic scaling, that's Solana. And so Solana, as it continues to mature, as a technology, it will be a fixture in how we deal with crypto on a daily basis, especially for extremely high scale things that require extreme scale. Solana will be a very interesting place. For Ethereum, the particular design choices, architectural choices that it's led to is really trying to focus on like a bedrock of network security, and that's been the focus of ETH. And so if I had to choose between ETH and Solana, if I had to, if it was like an NFT, let's say, I'd want that NFT, if I wanted to be there and be trusted for the next 100 years, let's say. Currently, I would choose Ethereum. For Solana, if I wanted something like, a bunch of things that has to be very fast, very cheap, and for like a mass consumer scale, like, oh, absolutely, Solana. So I'm a big fan of both, and I think they represent two architectural design choices.
Interesting. I think that's fair. With your obsession with digital permanence and object permanence, I can see why you'd lean in that direction. Look, we've got one final headline to do. We've got another 8 minutes left. But before we get into it, let's hit the Web3 roundup from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, of course, get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 24 hours. Number one, Kamala Harris is in talks to join Trump to speak at the Bitcoin conference in a very unexpected turn of events. The founder of Bitcoin Magazine, I believe, David F. Bailey, CEO of Bitcoin Magazine, said that they're in talks. So maybe that's going to happen. We'll have to watch this space. Number two, as Legendary already mentioned, the EU appears to progress with asset registry plan to document all assets, including art or precious metals. Of course, this got crypto Twitter into a bit of a frenzy this morning, thinking that they're going to come after your coins and you're going to have to disclose them. We'll have to monitor that. Next, DeFi exchange DYDX reportedly in talks to sell platform. Looks like Wintermute might be a potential buyer there. Next, Igloo raises $11 million for Abstract Chain, led by Peter Thiel's Founders Fund. Obviously, that's the chain by Lucanets and Pudgy Penguins. Getting into some more media side of things, Doodles announces Doodles TV, next-gen direct-to-community media platform. Doodles really crushing it on the kind of creator side at the moment. Forgotten Runes, Brad mentioned them earlier, release a trailer for game and reveal NFT holder benefits. They've really been building non-stop since 2021. Really respected team with some cool IP. And then finally, Bitcoin mining firm Riot Platforms acquires block mining in $92.5 million deal. That's the Web3 roundup from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. We've just got another 6 or so minutes left to hit the final headline, where I've just got a few interesting details to share about how the BlackRock fund is kind of interacting with some crypto native protocols. So we've spoken about Ethena before. Ethena is not as such a stable coin, but kind of a synthetic dollar, which people can trade their USDC for, and you earn a yield. And they shared this information yesterday, which I'm just going to share because I don't know if people fully understand how the likes of BlackRock are attempting to interact with these protocols. So what they said was this. They said, Ethena, the reward-bearing asset proposal with entities pitching for an allocation from Ethena's liquid cash backing. So entities are going to these crypto native protocols and requesting an allocation from their reserves. So one of the early applications is from Securitize, the distributors of BlackRock's Biddle fund, for an allocation from Ethena's reserve fund. They actually share the proposal summary here. So I'm going to take you through it just so you get a sense of what is kind of up for grabs. So what Securitize said is that they said Securitize is committed to developing solutions in the digital asset space that help solve real problems, specifically by bringing digital asset securities to different markets for treasury management, portfolio diversification, and secured ecosystem utility. I'm showing this on screen, by the way, if you want to watch us. Remember, we're live on YouTube and X video as well, if you find it easier to kind of read along. This is all up on screen. They say Securitize is the leader in tokenizing real-world assets. A bunch of other details. Since its launch in March 2024, Biddle has become the fastest growing and largest fund of its kind, reaching over $500 million in AUM in less than 4 months. So that's how much money Biddle has attracted. As the first fund to reach this milestone, Biddle is paving the way in enabling players across the industry to more effectively diversify reserves and manage their treasuries. The utility of the token can be seen across funds, DAOs, stablecoins, and other yield-bearing products. And this is their pitch to Ethena. BUIDL can enable Ethena's reserve fund to invest in a treasury-backed product as a low-risk diversification play, while gaining the efficiencies of holding blockchain-based reserves in a product that earns some stable yield. They actually go on to make a specific application, which is interesting. Securitize, as the distributor of BUIDL, proposes an allocation of $34 million of the $45 million of the reserves. 18 million from USDT in Ethena's treasury would instantly begin to earn yield on the balance if transferred. Additionally, if the $15 million in DAI is not being used to yield farm or is returning highly variable yield due to staking that locks the asset, moving the balance to BUIDL would enable the Ethena to earn a stable yield, reduce protocol risk, and retain DeFi native interoperability. So this is really interesting to me because I didn't know precisely how these mechanics worked or how BlackRock and the BUIDL fund were kind of interacting with on-chain protocols. That was news to me. So I wanted to share that, but would love to throw to Legendary first, and maybe go around the table here to hear what our thoughts are in the final few minutes. Legendary first.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen Brett smiling through half of that announcement, so very curious where his mind is going with that. I'm gonna probably take a bit of a non-edgy take with this. It's interesting to see that a lot of the keywords that are thrown around there resemble very much TradFi speak when you talk about the treasury management, the portfolio diversification aspects,
Sure.
which obviously makes sense. And it's interesting to see that the BUIDL fund is taking that perspective when it comes to Ethena. And it actually, when we talked about it first, I wasn't sure like how Web3 native this thing is gonna be, but just the way how this proposal is worded, including the very last part, and give us DAI and we're gonna farm yield with that, it shows me that they've done a lot of studying and arrived to how Web3 works and how much we're obsessed with yield farming very, very quickly. Let's put it like that.
That's funny. Brad, straight to you. Close us out. You're going to tell us that you don't care.
No, I'm in on this one. One.
Oh, you're in.
So
okay.
Yeah, so one, I'm super, it's awesome that like, you know, BlackRock, biggest institution in the world, is actually getting like deeply involved and intertwined in our ecosystem. That's healthy to see. But the thought process I went through with all this, right? Backing is obviously the key word there. And I go, oh, they're going to back Ethena. Ethena has had a lot of parallels drawn. There's no fundamental ties between the mechanisms of Luna and Ethena, but everyone has done is Ethena going to blow up this time around thing? So then my mind goes, man, if everything was hectic, crazy, chaotic, and there was so much capital destruction last time with Luna, imagine if even with BlackRock now serving as the backer, if everything goes sideways again, which whatever might be possible, we're not immune to it. Imagine the fallout of not only just like it being compartmentalized into crypto. It's like we also fucked up the largest institutional, like our institution in the world, and we took them down with us. So sorry about that. Let's run it back. See you guys in 2028. Yeah, that would be weird.
Maybe add a few years if we literally take the whole
maybe 2032.
Yeah. See in 2036 or something once we've recovered. That's a funny idea. But I mean, do you think that potentially there's actually some security in distributing this out into?
Of course. I was wondering, like, would a mechanism like this or participation from external large institutions been able to have saved a Luna potentially, right? Because maybe it was so isolated, having to self-manage its own stuff, and because it was like all internal like that, right? It was the LFG was trying to save its own assets with its own assets. It was highly dependent on convex internal assets. So like, had you been able to distribute that throughout the ecosystem and had there been broader participation, maybe it would not have been so catastrophic, and maybe again that convexity may not have leaned into it. So yeah, I mean, maybe we're learning and this will be better for the future.
Interesting. I like that point to close out today. But guys, that has been a fantastic show. Hope you enjoyed it as always. Han, it's been great to have you with us. Just want to give you a final chance to say, where can we keep up to date on the various things you're up to? Obviously, a bit of 6529 Capital stuff, Deca, Shape. What's the best place to keep up to date?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It was a lot of fun today. Best way to keep up is on Twitter, so bonafidehan, and then for Shape, it's Shape L2, Shape _ L2.
Got you. Definitely, we will continue to report on what you guys are cooking up over there. So thanks so much for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure to hear not just what you're up to, but also those kind of historical NFT stories that you have. Real pleasure. Thanks again for everyone listening in. Thank you to my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Bread. Thanks to Han for joining us. And thank you to everyone in the audience. Remember to do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST. We're live on X. We're live on YouTube too. And you can catch us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if that's how you prefer to consume the media. Take care. Have a good day. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.